Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. The world you're currently listening. Um, and I thought reflect on some of the things that I've talked about previously regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and economic, as well as humanitarian implications of this war throughout the world. Obviously, the U.S. is the main contributor in terms of funding and support to Ukraine in terms of aid, but it also implicates a lot of European member countries that are already economically struggling on top of their additional support that they have to, basically drum up for Ukraine and its aid. A few months ago, I did a podcast entitled "We the U.S. Taxpayer." So this is kind of a continuation regarding that podcast. I made a promise of sharing the PowerPoint presentation that I did while I was in Crete, and unfortunately, my um, online tool wasn't working, and I couldn't upload the PowerPoint presentation. So I'll just give you guys a quick overview regarding that specific subject matter that I talked about back in, I believe that was in July of 2003, while I was in Greece. And as y'all know, just yesterday, Tucker Carlson had released his interview that took place in February 6th with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And so some of the material that was covered in that interview was also presented to you guys, my podcast back in July. So I just want to give you guys a reference per se. It's not as comprehensive as the interview, obviously, but at least I'll give you some sort of a reference regarding what they were talking about. So I'll share my, show you the PowerPoint presentation that I made. So again, this was PowerPoint presentation that I covered in July of 2023. This is entitled PowerPoint presentation on how Ukraine will be paying back to U.S. taxpayers. It's a short, simplified version. I want you to do your own accounting and financial amount and distribution process on our accounts payable as the U.S. Um, provides the aid to Ukraine, financial support and aid to Ukraine. So I'm a former financial analyst, as previously mentioned, with the federal government. I've also worked with the World Bank and the IMF on various collaborations and consulting activity, maybe finance or market development. I specialize in economic development in frontier and emerging markets of Central and Eastern Europe. I've authored books on new world market concepts in the globalization of markets, and the globalization market only is pretty much, it's just like uh, it sounds pretty big and it sounds pretty intense, but what that really is just talks about the ongoing activity throughout human civilization, which is trade. So whenever you all hear about globalization or internationalization, don't be that deer caught in front of a moving car and a headlight. It's really not that intense, and it's not that so what's the word I'm looking for? So involved that you would kind of be, put off of it. It's not, that big of a deal. It's been happening throughout human civilization. So people have been trading ever since people are able to travel and walk on the land bridge. So also I've done, public speaking events in the international circuit. And then also an active contributor to the New World Market concept and evolution. Again, New World Market only pertains to, how people are now using, technology to trade and build a commercial relationship. Okay, folks. So that's just, a quick overview. Um, so in my podcast, I talked about Ukraine and Russia's history, and this was also covered by Tucker Carlson's and Mr. Vladimir Putin's interview that they published just yesterday. So the two countries shared heritage that goes back more than 1,000 years to a time when Kiev, now Ukraine's capital, was the center of the first Slavic state, Kievan Rus, the birthplace of both Ukraine and Russia. In AD 988, Vladimir the Great, the pagan prince of Novgorod and Grand Prince of Kiev, accepted the Orthodox Christian faith and was baptized in the Crimean city of Chersonesus. So this is why Crimea is so significant to Russia and why they're so attached to it. Russian leader Putin recently declared that Russians and Ukrainians are one people, a single whole. That is fairly true in many ways and aspects, just because of their family ties, their religion. They share pretty much the same faith. And this was also covered yesterday on that interview between Mr. Putin and Tucker Carlson, which I'm glad that they managed to, touch up on some historical and relevant material. So there's a reference for us to kind of understand, the connection between the two countries. So this was actually the source of this material is with the National Geographic. They published it last year. So why is it relevant? They signed a mutual agreement. One is the Budapest Memorandum, which was signed in 1994, December 5th. Second one was the Russian-Ukraine Friendship Treaty. So that's an agreement between the two countries that was signed in 1997, May 31st. And the most recent one, I guess, prior to the war was the Minsk Treaty, which was signed on September 5th, 2014. Y'all know there was a major crisis that took place in Ukraine in September 5th, 2014. And they also talked about, in their interview regarding the onset, what's basically started the war, which was, according to Mr. Putin, that there was some sort of rogue plane that was flying over one of their territories, and I guess that plane was dropping, some sort of bomb, or they were, doing some really crazy, nefarious activities over the territory of Russia, and that's basically what precipitated that war back in 2014. And as you all know, also in the same year, there was a commercial flight that was shut down. I'm not really sure who did the shooting or who's the culprit behind it, but there was a commercial plane that was shut down after Russia had decided to attack Ukraine in 2014. So on September 14, 2020, Mr. Zelensky, the president, Mr. Zelensky of Ukraine, approved Ukraine's new national security strategy, which provides for the development of the distinctive partnership with NATO, with the aim of membership in NATO during the global pandemic. This source came out of the NATO Wikipedia page, and basically the overall record keeping that they manage on their social media platform, NATO's social media platform. In April of 2021, Russian forces were stationed around the border of Ukraine and within the agreed territories in Ukraine, Crimea, Donbass. And the sources for this particular topic came out of csis.org. It's an analysis done by a think tank based out of Washington, D.C., which they call the Russian and Ukrainian Spring 2021 War Scare. So there's been a lot of think tanks in the Western world that have been paying attention to these kinds of muscle flexing and potential brewing conflict throughout the world. So we actually in the US, if you're paying attention to these think tanks in the US, there is a pretty good way to connect the dots through just listening to some of the think tanks and connecting the dots via their analysis. So that said, Ukraine's GDP before the war review and provide sources. So I mentioned these already in my podcast. What I'm going to do is I'll just leave it up here for you guys to review and listen to the podcast. It's also this particular PowerPoint is also available on our YouTube channel, faceconomicsTV YouTube channel. So you can run, both podcasts and the YouTube channel and see these figures on it. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because I still want to listen in again to the interview and opine on the interview between Tucker Carlson and Mr. Vladimir Putin. So what I'll do is just I'll leave this all up for you guys to look into and connect it with the podcast and it'll make sense hopefully for you. So I'll move on to the next page. EU European contribution to Ukraine in 2023. I'll leave this up here for a few minutes and then we'll move on. I don't want to keep on talking about the same material that I've talked to you before, just that I want to make sure that you guys get access to the PowerPoint material that I was reading off from, so you have a reference regarding the figures. Some of these might have changed since last year, just because there's quite a bit of, information as well as budgeting and expenses as well as liabilities that made it into I guess the overall budget for Ukraine, not just from the US but also from the European Union. So some figures might be a little off or maybe have changed, whatever, but at least you have a reference regarding the overall loan amount and contribution to Ukraine in terms of aid and financial assistance. So this was a letter that I sent to Ambassador Markarova. She's the ambassador to the United States. As a former US Senate candidate, I do try to inform my supporters regarding this war just because of my overall professional background. And my dedication to developing trade and commercial relationship with Central and Eastern Europe, mostly in frontier and emerging markets of Central Europe. So I wrote this to Ambassador Makarova. I don't think she's ever going to respond or if they even read it, but I just thought I'd share this with you on the PowerPoint presentation. What precipitated the war, economic conditions. So there's quite a bit of stuff that precipitated the war. Okay. And then based on yesterday's, conversation between Tucker Carlson and Mr. Vladimir Putin is that, the war didn't really affect the Russian economy that much, in spite of all the sanctions against them. So obviously they were anticipating several, market disruptions prior to the onset of the war. So I guess they thought about basically buffering their economy prior to the war. So obviously they were very interested on the economic implications of the war prior to attacking Ukraine. So that in itself is telling indicator of the overall magnitude of this war in terms of the globalization of markets, as well as the developments of frontier emerging markets in the region. This taxpayer funds sent to Ukraine, not itemized, but overall amount based on financial accounting review by watchdog agency usafacts.org. How much money has the U.S. given Ukraine since Russia's invasion? According to this, it's 115 billion in emergency funding to support Ukraine in wartime. This material was published February 24, 2023, so almost a year ago, and it was updated March 28, 2023. I'll leave this up to you guys to go check their website out. Maybe this amount has changed since, but in reference to my previous podcast back in July, I just want to make sure that you have this PowerPoint presentation to look at as a reference. Okay, so let's drill down to the facts. This federal government spent 6.48 trillion last fiscal year, meaning last year, fiscal year of 2022. Money spent on Ukraine today would be equivalent to approximately 2% of US budget. And the source for this is usafacts.org as well. And the link is at the bottom of this PowerPoint presentation. So pause it and copy and paste the link, and so that you can get to this material. US set to provide assistance to Ukraine into the 2030s. And this source is also via USA Facts. That was published by Congressional Budget Office. So it talked about the Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act of 2022 and another one for 2023. And the further extension, which was also called Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act 2023, and additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act of 2023 is also referenced. So this was from last year. So as of the publication of my podcast, there was about 114.9 billion in aid over the last year, contained in 4 separate bills. 30 billion in military assistance that was dated 2024, 2022, not calculated into the 114.9 billion. So you include that as an addition on the overall amount. Plus, in 2022, the U.S. appropriated nearly 55 billion in foreign aid towards supporting Ukraine, not calculated into the 114.9 billion. So depending on how the balance sheets and charts of accounts was developed, I know there's been some discrepancy regarding some of these figures, but at least it gives you, an overview. Just because the accounting could be a little off, just because some of the amount wasn't really accounted for. I guess some money have gone missing or whatever, or appropriated or calculated on the overall accounting record keeping that was I guess provided to Congress or whatever. So here we go. Military assistance and foreign aid. It's on there. So I gave you guys an itemized breakdown of the amount that was provided to Ukraine. And since I haven't seen the chart of account, I don't know how they classify these amount in the balance sheet, but at least now you know how much it is that according to the the publication of the amount that was provided. Let's see. Okay, so that's grand total of 199.9 billion US tax dollars. And again, there might be some discrepancy on this amount. It could be more, it could be less, but it gives you somewhat of a reference to how much, the ballpark figure is. Accounting for US taxpayers reporting will be ongoing for 9 years. According to them, the watchdog is the previous watchdog organization that provided, but yet so much amount have been provided overseas to people that are not directly connected to the US, but we're having to deal with all sorts of social issues in the US that we could have easily, used the money for to basically build capacity in our country. All these people that are struggling with homelessness, we could have easily put them in a house, affordable housing or whatever, or deferred payment housing or whatever, that they can get back on their feet and be, contributing citizens of the country. They can get back to the workforce or create a job. Business, small business. There's so many ways that we could have helped our population to help increase our economic potential in the states with that money that was sent to Ukraine. But yet we decided to gamble without any clear support or indicator that we're going to be able to indication or that we're going to be able to recover the money that we spent in Ukraine. Poverty rate in the US. Okay, so this is from out of Columbia University's Poverty Center report. You can see that there. Number of children in poverty, monthly child poverty rates by children, race, and ethnicity. And alarming, pretty high. Okay, so these are children that are living in poverty in America. So some of these people are these children are growing up without any basic, nourishment, without the educational support and other anything that would help them increase their potential as an adult. All right, so 3.4 million more children in poverty in 2022 than December 2021, according to the research done by Columbia University. Crazy. Okay. So here's a CNBC report. Worst states for infrastructure in America. You can see how it looks in some of these cities and rural areas. I didn't name all the states because I want you guys to do your own research. Just copy and paste this report. The source is cnbc.com. I'm gonna leave that up there so you can do your own research. And I believe this publication was provided in 2021 before we started to decide to send money overseas. People losing their homes in the US is pretty high too. Cleveland and Detroit were the ones that were basically spotlighted by finmasters.com / foreclosure rate hyphen rate. And the average foreclosure rate in the US was 0.23% in 2022. The highest foreclosure rate in the last 20 years was in 2010 at 2.23%. New Jersey is the state with the highest foreclosure rate, with one foreclosure for every 2,271 homes. So that's very significant, folks. 0.23% in 2022. Educated, has a mortgage but no home. So we got thousands upon thousands of educated people that are struggling to even have a place to live in. Okay, and we're sending billions and billions of aid to countries that have yet to prove their intention to repaying us back. Okay, so these educated people could have been contributing to the U.S. economy, without all the stress of where to live and how to satisfy their basic needs. Okay, so if you don't have people working and they're not paying tax, where's the government going to get the money that they're sending overseas? I mean, nobody ever thought about that. I mean, we the taxpayers are the one that are having to support all these, unnecessary war, because they're all the war around the world could all been prevented if the diplomacy was enacted. Okay, if people just sit down and have calm minds and try to hash things out and sort things, like adults. War in the year 2024 is the fallacy of today's generation. There is no need for war, there is no need for violence. You can grow a market, you can develop capacity. There's a lot of ways to build an economy up of a country. I mean, I've that's my background, that's my experience, is to help build countries economy throughout the world. So it's not impossible. What's impossible is pride, dealing with prideful people that would rather put their pride over the well-being of their people and their country and their government. Then that's a problem. Okay, but in today's world, there really isn't any excuse for war. There's no point to have any conflict uh, that would require human, carnage and suffering. Okay, folks. Um, all right, let me move on. So, student loan debt, the shackle that keeps people in slavery in America. There's a lot of slaves, hundreds, some thousands of slave educated people that wanted to contribute to the US, that wanted to help, stimulate the economy, that want to educate themselves, that want to be productive members of society, want to give back. But yet these are our today modern day slaves. These are the people that are, the quality people that we should have in a country, and and is, the economic backbone and tax-paying support of a country, yet they're going to extreme economic hardship just because they wanted to educate themselves. You look at around the world, especially in developed countries, they don't require hundreds of thousands worth of, you know, student, payments to attend a university or a college, because those same people are the ones that are going to help develop the economy. They're going to be skilled workers and professionals. They're going to be major contributors of the economy. But yet in the US, we got billions of billions worth of student loan that the country can't serve. People in their 60s, 70s, 80s are still making payments on their student loan aids. Um, it's just unbelievable. Yet we're sending billions and billions overseas to other countries that have no intention or have yet to give us any indicator that they want to repay us back. So all this information, if you tally them up, it's 5.1 million Americans will be able to contribute to the US economy without the load and burden of all these student loan issues. Okay. Um, I mean, I would think if people are, skilled and educated and is supposed to contribute to an economy and society, that the government would want to less the load on them, you know. But yeah, that's not the case. Unfortunately, we're still having to deal with I mean, generational debt that people are having to pay for. Yeah, it's a sad story, folks. Let me just go ahead and move on to the next slide. And yeah, so this whole situation is just beyond, the typical, national crisis. This is a humanitarian crisis that will catapult and will hurt us for a long, long period of time as a country, as a society, as, professionals that are educated, because of the fallacy and because of the greed of people that are, putting young people in a slavery position, and be enslaved for the rest of their lives because of all the student loan debt. Okay. That said, folks, I think that's the end of my presentation here. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Again, I'm going to share this PowerPoint presentation on our YouTube Face Economics TV channel, so y'all can, pause it, read, and copy and paste whatever you need to do to research and have a reference. But I want you to, also go on your own and do your own homework. Okay. I'm just giving you a reference. Again, my podcast back in July 2023 is already available online. So just look that up in both our Spotify platform, Face Economics Podcast on Spotify, and our YouTube channel, which is Face Economics TV. No, nothing is perfect, but we're making progress, and that's where we're, after is progress, right? So let's try to educate ourselves further regarding the overall situational condition and render a solution to a pre-existing condition uh, regarding the U.S. and other, markets that we're dealing with. With that said, folks, thank you for listening. My name is Al Mina. I'm the concept author of Face Economics, the utilization of the social media platform economic development, as y'all are on now on the social media. Um, Never, the social media platform has never been available in human history. Okay, we're basically test driving it today, and hopefully we can fine tune it and improve the quality and the utility of this platform. I mean, eventually our great grandchildren will utilize this platform well after we're gone. So let's make the best of it now. Not looking for perfection, but we definitely want to have progress and continue to fine tune this medium that we can now utilize in the modern world. Thanks for joining me. Look up Face Economics, and thank you for your time.